Hello, everyone. My name is Aisha Langford, and I'm the founder of Funeral Syllabus, where the motto is make a plan, keep the peace, leave a legacy. Today, I'll be talking about estate planning with Terrence Quinn. Mr. Quinn is an estate planning attorney in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and the founder and president of the TGQ Law Firm, which provides legal assistance to clients in the areas of estate planning, probate law, and elder law. The goal of today's podcast is to better understand what estate planning involves and to normalize conversations about end-of-life issues. Okay, so we're going to jump right in. So, Mr. Quinn, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what motivated you to become a lawyer?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. And this is wonderful. I love the work that you're doing. This is amazing, sharing this great information with people through the different topics that you have. I think this is exactly what people need, and it's my privilege to participate. So thank you for inviting me. Yeah, so I'm a lawyer. I've been practicing law for a couple of decades, a little bit over a couple of decades. As you can see, went to University of Michigan, played a little football while I was there, went to the law school in Ann Arbor as well, and came out, worked for a big law firm. Right around the recession, around 2008, I left the firm to open my own law firm and to do solely estate planning. So dealing with wills, trust, probate work as well. When people don't plan correctly, that's what I do, and I enjoy it.
Okay. And some people have never heard of this term estate planning. So what exactly is estate planning and why is it important for everyone, even if you're not wealthy or even if you don't have a big income?
Yeah. And, whenever I use the words estate planning, I always put wills and trusts after it because, as you said, most people don't know what estate planning is. They sometimes say, you're talking about estate planning with the state, or what are you? No, talking about estate planning. And what it is, it's the area of law that helps people deal with all things surrounding two questions. And I think that these are two of the four most important questions that everybody will deal with at some point in life. Number one, what happens to your assets and your children if you die? And I know we don't like to talk about death a whole lot. However, we need to. We should plan around it. And so that first question, which I think is among the four most important ever, is what happens to your assets or your children if you die?
What are assets? Like what?
Everything that you own, anything that you own. So whether you think it's worth value or not, the money you have, the property you own, cars, land, all of that, retirement accounts, life insurance policies, all of that is considered an asset. And so what's going to happen to that stuff if you die? What's going to happen to you? Your body is an asset. And so what's going to happen to you if you die? All of that is just the first question. I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Not if you die, when you die.
When you die. That's correct, because that's one thing that's going to happen, right? But there's a second question that it falls under the estate planning house or umbrella, which is equally important. And we forget about this sometime. And that question is, if you suddenly could not make decisions for yourself, who would make decisions for you and what would they decide? Who's going to have the legal power and authority to make decisions for you? And are they going to make decisions in the way you'd want them to? So estate planning, I often say, I actually just finished a webinar just before jumping on here. And I always say, estate planning is your effort to answer those two questions at a time that you can no longer answer those two questions. By putting them in writing in a way where we can read them at a time that you can't tell us what you wanted. You're telling us through a writing. That's estate planning.
Okay. And what are the key documents that may be involved with estate planning? So you mentioned wills and trust, and I've also heard about powers of attorney and advanced directives, and sometimes it can get kind of confusing.
Yeah, so those are actually the base documents of estate planning. But truthfully, estate planning involves any tool that you use that's legal to give an asset to somebody else or to direct what's going to happen with you. Who will make decisions for you and how you want them to decide. So any tool that you use. So truthfully, beneficiary designations are a part of estate planning. Joint ownership, though I typically encourage people or discourage people from doing joint ownership, that's an estate planning tool. But as you mentioned, at the core of an estate plan, everybody 18 years old and older should have at least a will, a financial power of attorney, and a healthcare power of attorney. I don't need to know what anybody owns. I don't need to know anything about them to tell them that they absolutely should have at least a will, a financial power of attorney, and a healthcare power of attorney. Now, depending on four different factors at least, those four factors help me determine if I'm going to recommend that you also have a trust. And those factors are what you own, meaning the type of asset, the value of the asset, the to whom you want those assets to go, and the how you want them to get to them. So what you own, meaning the value as well as the type, who you want to get it, and how you want them to get it. A discussion with me where we deal with those questions helps me determine if you should have a trust. People think trusts are only for rich people like Oprah Winfrey and Bill Gates, and they need them. They do need them for sure. But trusts are for anyone who wants to make sure their family is able to handle business without courts involved as much as possible.
Okay. And speaking of courts, sometimes when people hear like estate planning or end of life, I think the old school thinking was, well, I have a will or I just need a will. And you've mentioned wills, but maybe can you explain why a will by itself may not be enough?
Yeah, and you have a lot of attorneys who run around telling you, don't ever do a will. And I understand why they're saying that, and I understand the heart and spirit of what they're saying. But a will is actually a good tool. A will is a document that answers those questions, that at least answers the first, what happens to your stuff when you die? The problem, though, and this is the fundamental difference between a will and a trust. I'll have people call me and they say, hey, Attorney Quinn, listen, I want to come meet with you because I need to put a will in place. And I'm going to tell you, I really just need a simple will. I don't need all that fancy stuff. I just need a simple will. And what they're really telling me is I don't want you to charge me a whole lot of money. But they say, I just need a simple will. And I say, OK, no problem. I do simple wills all the time. But let me ask you a question. Are you OK with your family going through probate court when you die? And then they respond and they say, well, absolutely not. That's why I want you to do a will for me. So I'm coming to you so that they don't go through probate court. And I say, OK, well, I get it. I say, well, let me tell you this. Whatever type of will you have, whether it's a simple will or a complex will, if that's all that you do, your family is still going to go through probate court. And this is very interesting to a lot of people because nobody teaches us this. I don't remember learning this in law school, actually. A will is only for probate court. A will's sole purpose is to instruct the probate court. A will is nothing more than a letter to the court, letting the court know who you want to be in charge of your probate case. It used to be called executor. Now it's called a personal representative, or PR for short. Number one. And then number two, who gets everything after the whole probate process. So that's a will for you. So when we talk about the difference between a will and a trust, I tell people at a fundamental level, the difference is probate court. Because a trust's purpose, it's the proper tool. It's the best tool to rely upon if you want to make sure your family stays out of probate court. And that's the fundamental difference between a will and trust. You're OK with them going through probate court when you're gone? The time, the cost, the publicity, the conflict of court, then probably a will is enough. But if you want to make sure your family, as much as you can make sure your family stays out of probate court to handle everything when you're gone and receive the assets, then probably you want to have a trust put together because that's its purpose at a fundamental level.
Okay. And then what happens when somebody dies without any legal documents in place? So I've heard people say, well, my family will figure it out when I'm dead. The courts will figure it out when I'm dead. So what actually happens if someone just dies without anything in place?
Yeah, the figure it out plan is what you're talking about. Yeah. So with the figure out plan, really you do have to figure it out because there's no directions. There's no instructions. And ultimately what you find out quickly or figure out quickly is that in that scenario, the only entity that or person that has the authority to figure it out is the court by looking at state law. So if you have, let's say we got John Doe who owned a house and let's say he had $10,000 in the bank. And let's say let's just be all the way messy. And let's say he had a life insurance policy worth $100,000 and for whatever reason, there was no beneficiary. Well, he passes and he has two children. Well, they have to go to probate court in order to access all of those assets because only the owner of the property owner of the bank accounts, the owner of the life insurance policy can direct where those assets go when he's gone, when John Doe's gone. Only John can. But if he's gone and hasn't directed it, then state law directs it. And so a court has to be engaged so that the court, who only has authority now, can rely upon state laws. It's called intestacy laws to get specific, can rely upon intestacy laws to determine who's getting the stuff. And so it's problematic because court takes time. You know, there are three components of probate court that are problems. It takes time, 4 to 6 months by rule, it has to take. They take about a year on average. And in some cases, like our wonderful Queen of Soul, Aretha Franklin, her case is still going and it's 6 years later.
Wow.
It costs a lot. It can cost a lot. And it's open to the public in most states. In most states, if you don't have a plan in place and you pass, which is what you're asking, court case has to be opened and anybody can pull your file and they can find out what you owned. They can find out all about your debt, all about your children. And in most states, even the addresses of your children, because it's all public information at that point. And they probably can find out who got everything. So they know who to borrow money from because it's completely open to the public if you have nothing in place.
Okay. So my next question may help encourage people of why they need to actually talk to a real lawyer. But what are some special considerations for people, say, with blended families or partners who've been together but are not married? Say they've been living together, doing life together for 20 years, but they're not married, or other unique situations, like what if you have an adult child with special needs and that would be your sole heir?
Yeah.
One.
In almost every case involving those three scenarios, what happens if you haven't directed what's supposed to happen is not what you wanted. Let's take each one individually. So when we talk about blended families, for example, John and Jane Doe get married. They have separate children. Let's say that John dies first. Well, under intestacy laws, the laws that direct what happens if you haven't directed it, the majority, if not all of the assets that John owned are going to go to Jane, which might be fine. It's probably cool, unless John wanted some of those assets to go to his kids because they were assets between him and the children's mom, who say died earlier. But now mom too is going to own all of that stuff, which might be okay, but oftentimes it's not. But the bigger problem might be when mom too passes, those assets are going to go to her children alone. So first of all, when dad passed and he didn't have a plan in place, assets that were his alone are going to go to his wife. And now that can create stepmama drama.
Stepmama drama.
Stepmama drama. Yeah. I mean, it's a thing sometimes, right? And it didn't have to be. It didn't have to be a thing.
Right.
But now they think they should get it because that was their mom's. She thinks she should get it because that was her husband's, and she's the wife. Who's right? And the law says that the mom is right, even if that's not what dad wanted. But again, the bigger problem can be when mom too then passes and she hasn't planned, because studies show that 7 out of 10 people in all categories of people, wealthy people, professional people, broke people, blue collar people, white, it doesn't matter. Color, race, none of that stuff matters. 7 out of 10 people don't have a plan in place.
Wow.
And so mom too, when she passed, she didn't either. And all of those assets under Michigan intestacy laws or the intestacy laws of whatever state a person is in are going to likely go to mom two's children. And so now mom one's kids saw their stepmom get everything, which they didn't really like. And when the stepmom passed, now their kids get anything. And don't let the children of mom two have a problem with how the children of mom one treated their mom.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because now they don't want to give them the stuff, even though they know that was mom's sweater. They don't want to give it to them. So it's if you didn't plan correctly, in some cases you are creating the drama that wouldn't have even occurred had you planned correctly. You talked about a family with special needs.
Right. If there's an adult child with special needs.
Yeah. So in that case, a lot of times that child with a special need is on governmental support.
Okay.
or could qualify for governmental support. Maybe they need to qualify for it now that you're gone. But you left your assets for their benefit, which is good theoretically, but because you left them to that child, that adult child, it's probably going to disqualify them from governmental support. And
Oh,
so not only haven't you planned, and one thing I jumped right over, not only haven't you planned to make sure there's somebody who can look out for that adult child with a special need, which is the first and most important thing, but you've also left assets to them that they may not be able to manage depending on the need. And it's going to disqualify them from the governmental support that could have supported them. Whereas there's a way you can plan through special needs planning. And you only want to do that with an attorney who truly knows what they're doing. But special needs planning, where they can have their cake and eat it too, and it's all legitimate and legal, nothing sneaky or shady.
right.
They can benefit from your assets while also still being supported by the governmental benefit.
Okay.
But if you didn't plan correctly, that's not going to happen.
Right. And then my other scenario was unmarried partners. So
Yeah.
more and more people are choosing not to get married, and that's
Yeah.
fine. Um,
Right.
what actually happens if you've been a couple for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and you're not married
Mm-hmm.
under the law? And someone dies, do you automatically get something or not? Or how
No.
should people? Oh,
No. Mm-mm. No, you don't. So great question. Excellent question. And that's very common as well. I have plenty of clients who fit that same description. And so the law doesn't provide for Michigan intestacy laws, for example, don't really provide for your friend. What the law could consider to be your friend or acquaintance or lover, girlfriend. There's no girlfriend clause in intestacy laws, right? And so you might have wanted, maybe she lived with you, and or boyfriend or whatever. Maybe that person even lived with you, and you
right,
all built those assets together. But for whatever reason, those assets are in the name of your boyfriend who died. You all never put them joint for some reason. And boyfriend who died was previously married and had 3 kids who are estranged. And you all don't even, it sounds like I create all these horror stories, but this
no,
is
I
my
know
day.
it's real. I know it's real.
Yeah, I get these calls all the time, right?
Right,
And so he had 3 children who are estranged. They haven't even, the girlfriend doesn't even know him. But because those assets were in her name, his name, I'm sorry, when he died, and he didn't have a plan in place. Remember, that's the underlying theme, right? The common denominator, no plan in place.
right. First
Those
part of my
assets,
motto: make a plan.
make a plan. That's right.
Right.
Those assets are going to go to the estranged children. And if you can't find them, and that's, see, it keeps unraveling, right?
Wow.
And let's say he doesn't even know where they live because they've been out of touch. I'm just showing you how broad this can go. He doesn't even know where they live. You know what you have to do? You have to send that money to the state and put it on file at unclaimed property. And hopefully those estranged children will go look for it so they can get it. So I know I've just created a horrible scenario, but that's what happens. Now, even in a situation where none of that exists and they're great and everybody loves everybody, the point is, if you haven't planned correctly, that partner isn't going to get anything legally.
But what about common law? Isn't there something common law?
Not in Michigan,
Oh,
California, maybe,
okay.
but not Michigan. No,
Right.
intestacy laws say what should happen. And under those intestacy laws, now, could she make a claim that it really was hers? Yeah, maybe if it's the China. I mean, that has no title, right? So but it could be an argument in court who it belongs to. And now you got to prove why it's your China and why it wasn't your deceased partner's China, which would go to the
Right.
children. But if it's something with a title, if it's the property and only the decedents, the person who died, their name was on the deed, no, they don't get it. And I've had those cases. And we had to tell the surviving partner, you don't get anything. You don't even have the right. Watch this. You don't even have the right to open the probate case. You have no right to open the probate case to even bring that before the judge. You even have to find an interested party who will show up and probably want the stuff when they discover that they're entitled to it under law. You have to find them to get them to start the case. You can't even start the case.
Alrighty then. Okay. Another reason to at least talk to a lawyer. So even if people are unmarried, that's fine. We have no judgment. But there are
Right.
ways, if you are proactive and you make a plan, then you can have your partner or whoever you are with. There are ways that you can do that if you take appropriate legal action, even if you're not married. But you have to take
Uh,
legal action.
Absolutely, and you should. Like if when I meet that couple, I'm telling so early in my practice, I used to tell people I'm not pushy because I didn't want people to run from me, think I'm some pushy, desperate attorney. I tell people today I'm very pushy, not desperate, but I'm very pushy because I can see the path. Once you talk to me and I just hear a few things about your situation, it's just the way my mind works. I can see the whole path. I can see how this is going to unfold if you don't
Right.
plan correctly. So with that unmarried couple, whatever, however you do it is fine for you. But when it comes to estate planning, my push and my urge for you is to plan now because the scenario I just described is what you're setting yourself up for if
Right.
something happens with you. And we don't know when the something might happen. That's the key. That's the catch.
Exactly. Okay, so my next question is really something I hear all the time. So many people feel like they're just getting by and that they don't have any extra money. Eggs are expensive, milk is expensive, car notes are expensive. So people just feel like there is no extra to pay a lawyer to draft these documents, especially when you could just go online for $29.99 or $59, whatever it is, and get a kit.
Mhm.
So, for the folks who are very concerned, understandably so, about potential cost, what advice would you give them?
I first advise that they find a local farm or something or get some chickens for those eggs because I just bought some eggs last night and spent $8. So they are expensive. Right. So I get it. I fully understand the cost of things and how people feel about, and everybody's watching their pennies, and we should. And to me, estate planning is one of the best ways to watch your pennies and to make sure you're protecting those pennies so you can leave them to your children's children, right? A good person leaves an inheritance to his children's children. And so I get it. I understand the cost. There are a couple things that come to mind when I'm asked that question. So first of all, people aren't going to like this answer, but it's the truth. People have more than they think they have. And so when we sit down and actually go through the assets that they have, because that has to happen with your estate planning attorney. So by the way, whoever you use, whoever's watching this, whoever you use, make sure you trust them and make sure you like their personality because they really have to know everything about you. So you can't hide your assets from them and say I only have this much because they can't do their job correctly if you do that. But once we start turning those stones, you realize you have more than you do. Some assets you may not even think are assets, which is why I'm glad you asked me what are assets in the beginning.
Mhm.
But secondly, what I would tell you is it's very important to have the meeting with the attorney because unfortunately what happens with a lot of people, and this is I'm on my soapbox now. A lot of people view estate planning um, as a lesser important tool. Everybody says it's important because yeah, I know, and I want to make sure it's covered right. But just the fact that people are willing to use a kit tells me that somewhere along the path, we've greatly diminished the value of estate planning. Remember, I started by saying estate planning deals with what are two of the four most important questions in all of life. And so, to me, there are only two other questions in all of life more important than these because estate planning helps you plan around the things that really matter to you. All this other stuff we say matters, nothing matters as much as what's going to happen to you if tomorrow you can't make decisions for yourself. You get in an accident and suddenly you aren't there cognitively. Who's going to be taking care of you? How are they going to care for you? What are they going to give you? What aren't they going to give you? Where are you going to live? If you really sit in that scenario and really feel it for yourself, which we don't like to do, but we might find ourselves there. Who's going to do that stuff? And shouldn't you be the one to make that decision?
Right.
So without planning, and I'm still answering your cost question, without planning, you're leaving that totally to somebody else. And then the somebody else might be somebody you don't know. Or worse yet, the somebody else might be somebody you don't even like and who you know doesn't like you. And so when we talk about costs, I get it. We got to watch what we spend money on. And to me, that's the reason to do estate planning because you are spending your money on the thing that truly does matter, which is you and your stuff, and making sure it's all managed and handled correctly. So what is my recommendation for the person who's concerned about cost? Like I'm concerned about cost. My recommendation is have the meeting with a true estate planning attorney, right? Not just a phone call where you hear what they got to say and ask them the price. That's not what I'm talking about. Schedule the meeting, pay the intake fee, pay the meeting fee. It'll be some of the best dollars you've ever spent if you use somebody who truly knows what they're doing, because they'll help uncover for you. Probably you'll go in with a third of the ideas that are important to consider, and they will uncover the other 2/3 that probably matter more to you than the third that you thought about.
Right.
So you'll get that information. They'll give you direction on how to proceed and then offer you an opportunity to proceed with them. It's the best setup and best scenario. That's the best use of your money, even as you start to consider estate planning. Schedule the meeting with the attorney and let him or her start guiding you from there. I can't think of, and then I'll stop because I know it's a long-winded answer. I can't think of too many things that are more important right now than for somebody to have that meeting with an estate planning attorney.
Okay. And I've actually researched this for friends and family. So depending on where you are, many of the estate planning attorneys, if you proceed with them, they will actually apply that initial fee to your overall cost. So it's another thing to ask and to think about, and a way to
exactly right.
also save money. And so my last question is for people listening who are maybe a little stuck or scared to go forward. What is like one simple step that listeners can take today to get started on their estate planning journey?
Yeah, I would say watch my video. There's a video. It doesn't it's not, I'm not going to try to sell you something. It's not that kind of video. Go to my website, tgqlaw.com, click on the Start Here tab, or just go to tgqlaw.com/start-here. tgqlaw.com/start-here. If you go to that page, there's a video there where in 4 minutes, I talk about wills and trusts, probate, and powers of attorney, and really kind of like I did in this session, really break that down. The next thing is search for an estate planning attorney. If you're in Michigan, we can help. If you don't like my outfit today, then find another one. But make sure you find somebody who truly does estate planning and schedule the meeting. There's really nothing I would tell you to do other than that. Nothing to think about yet. Nothing to, because that attorney will have a process that unfolds all of that for you in the proper order and in the proper context. So watch that video, tgqlaw.com/start here. It's only informational. I don't even capture your info in case somebody's skeptical when you watch that video. Just click play, watch it. And then from there, find an attorney who knows what they're doing and book a meeting. And I would encourage you all, what's today, December 20th?
Right.
I wouldn't let January 20th pass and I hadn't yet had that meeting, not just called to schedule it, but hadn't yet had that meeting. It is that important. I feel like I'm on a mountaintop, and I feel like
No, it's okay. This is great. And so whenever someone is watching this, so make a plan, and within 30 days, try to find an attorney and have a conversation. So I actually have one more question that I forgot to ask. So we are based in Michigan, but there may be people, I know for a fact that I'll have family and friends in at least California and New York watching this at some point. Yeah. So how do people go about finding a good lawyer who is trustworthy? What would be your advice on how to start that process if you're in Georgia or Iowa or wherever you are?
Yeah, if you don't have an attorney that you can lean on to ask that question directly, like who do you know? Then I would say start with Google. I know it sounds weird, but start with Google and Google estate planning attorney near me. And then go through the list and check their, I'm going to tell you some specific things to look for, but check their reviews. Definitely check their reviews, their Google reviews. In addition to that, go to their website. And if this is what I do when I look for attorneys in other states for people who come to me, okay. I just Google it in that area, and then I go through their site, check the reviews, and I look at their website. If their website is talking about multiple areas of law, I do criminal and I do personal injury and I do landlord tenant and I do estate planning and wills and trusts and probate, I wouldn't use them. And they get mad when they hear me say this, but I tell people this. I wouldn't use them because estate planning is too important to use a general practitioner. You should use somebody who specializes in this area. If you go to their site and everything is about estate planning, it's about wills and trusts, it's about blended families and single parents of minor children, and all of that is what you see, then you're probably in the ballpark. Then the reviews will help with that. The years of experience will help with that as well. I also have a website where people can go and they can find attorneys who do this work. If they go, so I'm the chair of the Real Property Trust and Estate section of the National Bar. National Bar is the largest Black bar association. It was started back before we could be members of the American Bar Association. So everybody who's anybody is in it. And I'm the chair of the section of attorneys who do this work. And we're pushing to have 2 attorneys in every state at least who do this kind of work. So we have a website where we've put the attorneys up there that have wanted to be up there. So if you go to NBA, just like the basketball organization, if you go to the NBA-RPTE, Real Property Trust and Estates, NBA-RPTE.org, and if you click on the tab that says Spotlight,
okay,
then on that tab, you can click any state that you want that are there. And the attorneys that we have in that state that want it to be on the website are located there. So NBA-RPTE.org, and you'll be able to find attorneys that way.
Great. And we'll also put this in the show notes, the links as well, and on our Funeral Syllabus website. So thank you so much, Attorney Quinn, for sharing your time and your talent with us today. And hopefully everyone feels inspired to at least take the first step or the next step and to start making a plan. So thank you so much. And
My pleasure.
thank you.
Thank you.